back on this stage because last year was explosive. Transformative conversations happened that eventually led to transformative actions. And this year we aren't doing less, we're instead elevating the conversations in this room. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Today we have more panels than keynote speeches because we want the room to be engaging. We want to have conversations. We want to interact. We do not just want to listen. We want to contribute. And it's time for our first panel of the day. The first panel for the day is a very important panel session. It's an high-level conversation that speaks about what world-class African education looks like and who defines them. Of course, Africa should be one of the continents that defines them. It's a high-level conversation, and I want you to know that our panelists were carefully handpicked, and this panel session was well curated just to serve the purpose of the theme for this summit. So I want to show you that it's not your regular panel session where you just listen. We're going to have a section of that panel session where you also ask questions, where you contribute, where you interact. So it's very important that we do that. And first, I'll bring the moderator up, after which I'll bring up our speakers, we listen to their bios, and of course welcome them on stage with a resounding round of applause. First, I'd like to bring up stage our moderator for the first panel for Brint EdTech Summit 2026. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, can we please put our hands together for Adebayo Alomaja? A round of applause for him. As he takes a seat at the extreme end of the stage. A better round of applause for him. Thank you very much. He will be steering the conversation today, and I'm sure that we will do justice to the moderation. All right, this is it. Once I mention the names of our speakers, I would like to crave their indulgence to please stand while the technical team plays their bio as we listen to the heavyweights that they are. I want to show you that our panelists were handpicked and they're the right people for this conversation. First on the list, I would like to introduce one of our very distinguished panelists for Brint EdTech Summit 2026. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, can we please put our hands together for Okpeyemi Adetola? A round of applause for her. As you can see, she looks amazing. I have the distinct honor of bringing up stage our second panelist for Brint EdTech Summit 2026. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Ferdinand Eruka. A round of applause for him. Our third panelist for the Brint EdTech Summit 2026. Can we please put our hands together for Kehinde Banasco? A round of applause for Kehinde. Thank you so much for joining us. All right, the last but not least, please put your hands together for Morayo Ujikutu. A round of applause for Morayo. A better round of applause for her. Thank you so much. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Can we please put our hands together for Morayo? Thank you so much. All right, I'll leave us in the hands of our moderator, as I'm very sure that he will do justice to the theme of this panel discussion. Thank you so much. And I'd like us to get our questions ready, because after this session, we're going to have a question and answer session with the audience. Thank you very much. You have the floor.
Okay, so this panel session, we're talking about reimagining African education systems for a global world, right? And just a bit of context, the global world believes that there's been a shift from the information age, or you call it the internet era, into the intelligence age. And that becomes the context for a whole lot of transformation and shift across sectors and industries, including education. And so want to look into what that means, right, across various frontiers in the area of education. So I'm going to start with Okpeyemi. So, I mean, you've said that education should feel possible and not exclusive. Now, what in our current systems makes global learning feel distant, right, to what we see in the average Nigerian context, right? And how do we redesign, for that gap?
Okay, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here this morning. I'm going to highlight 3 things to answer your question. I think one thing that still makes global education feel impossible for a typical Nigerian student, first of all, I would say is the misinformation going on. So I'm going to be very practical. You meet an average Nigerian student, maybe in secondary school, and they have the potential to maybe like go outside there and then pursue opportunities. And then you ask them, why are you not going for these opportunities? And then you hear things like, I don't think I can afford it. Somebody said it was 100 million. So I was speaking to a student in Ghana, and then he was saying to me that he doesn't think they are giving anybody visa to study in the United States. I'm like, where did you hear that from? So you see a lot of people literally getting into the place where they are making decisions, life-altering decisions, just because of hearsay. Why some of those things may be true, right? It's important that we democratize, and that's to answer your question, how do we redesign these things, is that we democratize information. Universities, organizations, educational agencies are going into all of these places to ensure that they have access to the right information. So a lot of people are ruling themselves out so early because they are not exploring, okay, what are the scholarships available, what are the financial aids available, and all of these things. The second thing I'm going to highlight this morning is the access gap. I don't think we have talent gap in Africa. I think it's the access gap, which is that a typical top-end international secondary school in Lagos, for example, has a counselor that is helping their students to go through, what is it called now, to make the applications to study abroad, but who are the people that are going to all of these places in the low-end secondary schools? Who is talking to them about all of these opportunities? So I really think that we need to get into the place where we are entering into all of those places, and we are also extending these opportunities to the undeserving communities, if I may say so. The third thing I would say is also fear. Yeah, fear in a typical Nigerian student that this thing seems so far-reaching for me. I don't think it's something I can accomplish. And I think because of that, you see someone say, oh, it's tough out there. And so because of what somebody's experience, they get into the place where they're like, I'm not going to go for this. So I'm going to highlight those three things as one thing I think still makes global education feel not inclusive for a typical Nigerian student. So I mentioned fear, misinformation, and access gap. Those three things.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Can we round of applause, please? And I think I really, the second point, I like the fact that you started approaching on inclusion, right? The high end, the low end, and what needs to happen. And just like the event MC mentioned, that one of the things we're doing here is to also collaborate, right? We can start having conversations in that regard and see where that can take us to, right? Amazing. Okay, so Ferdinand, I'll come to you. Leap Africa focuses on leadership and youth. So how do we redesign curriculum, so it produces not just employable graduates, but young people who can build and lead systems. So I wanted to touch on that, based on numbers around you see 1.8 in Nigeria, million young people entering the market, and there are just roughly about 600K jobs. And in Africa, it's bigger, like about 11 to 12 million young people enter the market, and only about 4 million former jobs available. Approach it from that angle.
Okay, so good morning, everyone, once again. Just speaking out of experience here, one thing I want to say is, I think when it comes to the employment space, and just with interaction with a lot of organizations that we work with at Leap Africa, we focus too much. See, Africa focused too much on technical skills. Technical skills are good, to be honest. But when you talk about the top organizations and who they hire, the kind of people they hire people out of character. You can have a guy who has a first class and doesn't meet the criteria of someone an organization looking out for in terms of, okay, is this person teachable? If this person comes to the organization, what else is it for this person, to progress? And that leads me down to the leadership traits that a lot of these organizations are looking out for now. I'm going to still use Leap Africa as an example here. A lot of what we do and the work that we do is to ensure that, we are providing resources for youth development and still focusing on leadership, not just any kind of leadership, but ethical leadership. And we have frameworks, to do that. We're not just teaching you and saying and carrying manuals and saying, this is what it means to be a leader. We're actually showing you how to do that. So in all our programs that we run in the organization, we have something we call the Change Project. The Change Project in itself is we allow these young people to actually look at something, a problem in their community, and they look at it and say, let's devise a way to, solve this problem. Extensively, part of what we've always been doing over the years, and just looking at other countries, and I'm going to cite some examples here, just to permit me to do this. So there was a time I was doing research on how to improve, our Change Project framework. And I found out that in Japan, they have this, so to say, summer school, and young people actually go. It's like a built city, where young people at very young ages, I think from 3 or 4 years old to about 15 years old, they get the opportunity to, pick a profession. You can be a policeman, you can be a judge, you can be a nurse, you can be a doctor, and it is fully accessible to only those young people. The parents don't have to come in, they're just spectators and watching them, and they have, they get to do jobs, they get to, exchange money, they get to talk about banking, just within themselves. And I found out that it didn't just start from there. It started from Mexico about, I think, 1999 or thereabout, and that framework has gone beyond what it is. It's called Kidsilia or something of some sort. And what that does is that it teaches them about, that leadership trait they need to start having from the beginning. You can have all the technical skills and still, where you are is not progressing because you don't have that leadership to pinpoint and say, okay, you know what, there's a problem here, we need to solve this thing. That's why change project is very important for us. I always like to use one thing to say that, and it's a mantra I've always used when I talk to entrepreneurs. I always tell people that, do you know the fastest way to make money, I'm talking about money now, the fastest way to make money is very simple. You turn your problem into profit. If you see a problem, you are one of many who have that same problem. If you solve that one problem, automatically you've solved your problem and you've solved many other people's problem, and you can make profit from it. Google has a saying that they create their products for just one person. If they pick me, for example, now and say, okay, Ferdinand has a problem. If they keep solving for me, they know that there are 10,000, 1 million Ferdinands out there that have the exact same problem. So if you keep on solving for one person, you're able to do that. But you see, everything narrows down to how do we include, we start to have to include leadership into our curriculums from the get-go. We're too focused on technical skills. We see that even in countries like, Japan, go to the World Cup and, they're cleaning up after. It was not brainwashed. It was taught at the very early stage. See how important that is. So I think Africa needs to come off from, I have all the technical skills, I can code, I can do coding and all. I mean, I've seen mighty coders and they don't get the job. I've been part of that, but I think I'll leave it at that and say that it's important how leadership is important to our curriculum. Yep.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah, I remember that video. I saw it online. Yeah, amazing. Yeah, technical versus leadership skills. The balance is very important. Okay, and so I move to Kende. All right. We're going to look a bit into skill ladder. Right, so skill ladder is building a shared way to measure skill. And in reimagining African education systems, is the real problem what we teach or that we can't credibly prove what people have learned?
Like you said, is it what we teach or that we can't reliably prove what has been taught? I think it's a bit of both. I'll start off with what we teach. I think primarily, I don't know if in Gen Z days it's still the case, but for people after Gen Zs or pre-Gen Zs, it was always doctor, lawyer, engineer, right? And I think there was a high reliance on extremely technical professions and the skills that were tied to technical professions. So you're always wondering, how well did you do in engineering? Are you great at math, right? But not really questions about character, kindness, sense, which you'd call leadership in some extent. So I think we have only recently started focusing on less technical careers. So there is a little bit of a newness to that. So yes, to an extent, it is what we teach. Now, the second part is, once you haven't been teaching something, you don't actually know how to measure it, right? Where something that hasn't been recognized isn't measurable. So if we weren't teaching people and, kind of like giving them the context of being open, like what's it called, fully baked, for lack of a better word, where it's like, yes, you're smart in school, but are you also do you have great character? Are you kind? Are you empathetic? Things like that. If we didn't teach that, then the way to actually measure that wouldn't actually exist, because that wasn't a thing to think about before. So it's a bit of both, where we weren't quite teaching things outside of technical skills. And even now that we're teaching technical and soft skills, we're borrowing context from external countries, right? So even in Africa alone, how Nigerians think about hustle will be different from how a Ghanaian thinks about hustle. So as Nigerians, we have to understand what great looks like for us, what soft skills we embody naturally, what we need to learn, and then create the measurement systems for that. So it's a bit of both.
Yeah, measurement systems, powerful. Please can we give a round of applause? Very important. I still agree. There's that newness. All right, so Mariah, I'll come to you now. Okay, yeah, so we're coming to the cell domain. So every conversation about reimagining education, you know, it's always about curriculum and tech and things like that. So as an educational psychologist, what are we systematically leaving out that you like to put at the center?
So Frediland and Ken, they have touched on that a lot, soft skills, and they really emphasize how it's very important that it's not only maths and English we look at, but we look at our values, our kindness. So I feel like they have sort of answered that question in a way, but maybe I could speak a little bit about why is important. I think in the world in general, social emotional learning, soft skills, your mind, your values have been growing in the last 5 years. So we have seen that it's vital to the development of every child. The way it's being taught in the West doesn't really work for us at the moment. When you think about self-awareness, compassion, values in the West, they're looking at self-awareness in a different light that we are looking at it at. So we found that the West have seen that social emotional learning, everything that they spoke about is important, but we now have to localize it to fit into what we are doing as well. I'll speak a little bit about like AI and STEM and how it's going right now. So before, in the past, education was made in a way that especially here, we were educating to make people be yes and no, to just do what you say, right? A lot of Nigerians would not speak out. I worked in a 9 to 5 for 4 years, and if anyone wanted to tell anything to our boss, they came through me because they knew that I would speak out, which didn't make any sense at all. So we were taught to fear, we were taught not to speak out and just do as we are told. However, if you're doing that, the only thing that you can be is like a factory worker. There's not much you can do if you're not able to critically think on your own, right? And now with AI, all the machine work, like a lot of things that we would have used our brain for to say that we are smart, all the cramming and that we're doing in school doesn't actually, we don't actually need that anymore, right? Because AI can do that for us. So what would differentiate you from the next person is who you actually are, your values, your goals, your kindness, your compassion, all those things. So I feel like in the next 5 years, we'll see that these things are getting more and more important, because that's one thing that a machine cannot be. Yeah.
Powerful. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for bringing that perspective to the conversation. Very important. And we are seeing it happen, right? All right, so I'll come back to Opoyemi now. From your seat at CSU, how do African qualifications actually get read by global institutions, right? And what curriculum changes would make our students eligible on the world stage without erasing what makes them African? Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much for that question. I think that if I'm being completely honest, I think the problem is not the qualifications being undervalued. The problem is the difficulty that most foreign universities experience interpreting the way we evaluate, right? So you see that in Nigeria we do WAEC and NECO. In Kenya there is KCSE. In Ghana there is WASC, or that's how to pronounce it. So I see that for most of them, they're struggling to understand how do we interpret what is the evidence of learning, right? Just as Moji Morayo said, she mentioned about the fact that you can literally go through school. Many of us here seated right here, you know that you were able to pass some subjects back in secondary school because you crammed your way through. Yes or yes? Do you see what I mean? But most of those schools want to understand, can you solve problems? What community projects have you led can you share your idea very clearly in a way people would understand? I think that we need to go back in assessing the way we access students, not just with exams and many of those things. Now we need to be asking critical questions. And what does it mean for educational institutions on our side? What it means for us is that we need now to start paying more attention to digital literacy, which I think, is getting better, compared to before. We need to have project-based learning. We have to have community projects, and I think that is what matters when they read an application from an institution. They want to hear authentic story. Do you see what I mean? They want to hear authentic story. What agri-tech solution did you build? What sanitation project did you lead in your community? I think that tells a better story of leadership and resilience more than what any standardized test can give you. So that's how I think about it.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. Thank you, Opeyemi, for that contribution. Yeah, and this is where the world is, all right? That shift is very strong, and you've just exposed that foundation. That is very powerful. Thank you. So Ferdinand, again, I'll come to you. Curriculum innovation is one of your. If you could embed one skill into every African curriculum that isn't there today, what would it be and why?
I think that Opeyemi has just said it already, and I'll say that problem solving, or what we call critical thinking or design thinking. I think design thinking is one curriculum or a skill that should be added into the African curriculum. It's important because we need to move away from, like you said, just cramming and actually applying what we've learned. I think there's research that shows that young people have the best minds when it comes to problem solving. There was this, I can't remember now, whether it was Mythbusters or I can't remember one of the shows I used to watch, and they were trying to think of a solution for a problem, and what the scientists did was that they brought young kids to come and think of inventions that they could create. As funny as it is, and when I look back at it, a lot of the inventions we are seeing today are things that kids will say. I mean, I'm sure many years ago when a child would say, I want a flying car or a car that can go this, they will like, you're crazy. You don't know your limits, but I mean, we're in the world today. Who would ever thought that AI will get to the point it is today? I mean, we watched Terminator, and some of us are still thinking that it might still happen, but it's room for us to actually think about that. Critical thinking, design thinking is very important. I think it should be added into curriculum. Maybe something to add here. I went to a university where I had the privilege of knowing the DVC admin at then, and they were talking about how they wanted to cut down on budgets in terms of some of the things that they have to fix in the university. And the DVC was like, we have final year students in this school, for crying out loud. Why are they just doing defense and that's all? We have guys in wood engineering, we have guys in architecture, we have guys in urban ERP. They should take up all the things that is in the school. And it became something that, I mean, the school had to vet it and say, okay, it makes a lot of sense. Why don't you allow final year students do all these things? So they gave them a full building. Unfortunately, I was part of that too as well. So I'm giving you a real experience here. I was in the visual art and technology department. So I had my own place to play there too as well. So my final year project wasn't coming to write a book. It was real-world experience. The guys in the mechanical engineering, they started giving them the school cars. You guys should fix this thing. We're not giving mechanics again. You're in final year, for crying out loud. You want to do your IT and so to say. So give them the opportunity to do that. So I think that when you introduce design thinking from an early stage, you get to have this set of people who are now thinking beyond what it is today. I had the privilege of having those kind of parents, I mean, that allowed us, critically think about things. I learned computer, and I'm being very honest here. My dad got us a system. Me and my siblings were about 5 of us. It was Windows 95 or what was it that time, and he placed it in front of us. We didn't have a computer teacher. We had our accounts, and he said, figure it out. And that was it. Me and my siblings, we just kept on pressing. If this one is spoiled, okay, we know that this is spoiled. We just knew how to navigate from there. And I think that is something we should introduce at a very young age, because when you introduce that to young people, because young people are, they want to learn this thing. You see that from even your infants. I have a 3 months daughter now, and I'm watching her, even though she's growing faster than what 3 months, based on research. People are saying that by 3 months she'll be doing the, but I don't know, is doing 9 months things, so I don't understand what the research are doing, but it's very, very important for me now, because I'm seeing my own child, and I'm wondering what are the things I need to place for my own child to have that way of thinking, because I'm looking at it for the future of Africa. So what should my child also be, interacting with at this stage? Design thinking, and I'm just ending here. Design thinking is important to be added as a skill into our curriculum.
Yeah, absolutely. Design thinking. Please, can we give Fred a round of applause? Thank you for bringing that forward. Okay, so Kendi, let's talk about AI, and because again, this is the intelligent age. I mean, AI is a global conversation, right, across every sector. So, where does formal education still matter in a skills-first AI-mediated world, or are we heading towards degrees becoming optional? But before you get into that, just yesterday, I saw that ASU, they just added this degree on content creation, right? And would we begin to see more things like that? How's that changing?
So that's a good question, and I'm sure everybody here uses AI in one form or another, right? When you're using AI, how can you tell the rubbish from the nonsense? Because honestly, if you don't have sense or you're not knowledgeable, you can't actually tell the difference in anything, right? So to a large extent, there is still a role for education to play, because the principles as it stand today for any sort of content area or subject area needs to be documented. So think of it as like the rules and the responsibilities of a certain use case, right, needs to be documented. Where AI is now going to sit today is that where before knowledge type tasks, so what is this, define that, all of those things that we used to do before, where even when you go to your exam, they tell you, what's that thing, periodic table, you have to memorize the periodic table. Do you get, like, what does that mean in any context, right? You don't need to memorize it, but you do need to know what the properties and characteristics are, so that when you come into a room and you smell eggs, you know it's ammonia, right, for example. So you do need to know the principles that are documented based on observation, hypothesis, whatever scientific method you want to use. I think education today should do a good job of letting you know that, one, the context exists. Here's where you go and find the context. And it should teach you the discipline of learning the context on a daily basis. So while you might not use, all these things I'm talking about, whether ammonia or whatever, right? I'm not going to use it every day, but I know that if I need to understand or determine that that this is a chemical, what type of chemical is it, I need to go to the periodic table. Do you get? So education just teaches you the discipline of learning. Now, AI today can tell you anything, right? So even if it's just, once you now combine that with the discipline that you have created or you've gotten, then it becomes more useful. But sometimes I might use AI to check a subject area that in fact, when you're using AI to check a subject area that you're familiar with versus something you're not familiar with, you can tell AI when it's wrong, right? AI is also consistently kind of evolving / taking different contexts, and if you don't have those disciplines, you wouldn't be able to discern between what's factual and what's not, or what's useful and what's not. I think that's
and of course the discipline and structure that formal education brings forward is still very critical. Yeah, amazing. Thank you for that. Okay, so so Mariah, Africa has a young, fast-growing population. What happens to a continent if we scale academic systems but neglect the emotional development of a whole generation? Now, this is very critical because of our numbers, right? What are you seeing because of where the world is today, in that conversation?
So again, we've been speaking about it for a while now. Can you guys hear me? Is it
Yeah, we
working?
can hear you.
Okay. So I think academics without social doesn't. Okay, let me put it this way. The person that runs an organization is usually not the smartest one in the room. You would get a lot of really smart people that got first class, but they are behind the scenes. A lot of them cannot communicate. Probably only still have their jobs because they are the best at their jobs, but not necessarily they can't really pass where they are. So it's almost like you are not able to reach your full potential to critically think and to mix up with other people if you don't do the social part as well. Academics is also a very, especially in this country as we know it, because you come first in class doesn't mean you know how to do it, doesn't mean you would remember it the next day, right? So it's very important to mix up. So you won't even pass the interview for the job. You might pass the written one, but once it comes to tell me about yourself, how do we go about this, you might not be the right person for the fit. Because again, in an organization or anywhere, the culture is the most important thing. I would say, and I can actually be my choice. Obviously, this percentage is not like fact is not like for a fact, but I'll say like 90% of things that I've been able to achieve is based on social skills, right? So I'd say like that's one thing that I think that is very important. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. Please can we celebrate this amazing set of people here, and thank you for every perspective you brought to this conversation. We're seeing the shift in what education needs to look like. The world is a global village. We're seeing that there are opportunities. We're seeing that we need to step forward. There's a lot of opportunity. We're seeing that even right in this room, there are conversations that can start and that can lead to massive transformation, right, in the education landscape in Lagos, in Nigeria, in Africa. I do hope that everything you've heard from these amazing people becomes something that lays a critical foundation for how you begin to see education and for the things that you begin to do to move education forward wherever you find yourself. Thank you again, everyone. Thank you. It's been an awesome time with this amazing set of people here.